my agenda items. And so Alex, do we have to say anything regarding a public meeting or?
You can just sort of introduce what group this is and who you are, and then you don't have to say anything besides that.
Okay, so this is the housing, are we the housing planning committee? Plan working group, we're the housing plan working group, and we're the subcommittee regarding capacity. And I'm Natasha Spada. Our group is Michael O'Brien and Carol Fischetti. Is that how you say it, Carol?
Yes.
Okay. And
I apologize for my black screen, but that's what is happening today. I don't know why.
No worries. And so just in general, I think what we met last week and regarding capacity building, and we decided that we would meet again this week and next week because we have a meeting June 9th. And so we set some goals for finding, information on capacity, which I was just asking Alex Cleve from the planning department if we have a comprehensive traffic study in the town, and we don't. It's project based and it depends on when it was done. So that was one of the tasks that I had. I also had another task regarding town available land. And so I reached out to Hank Half from PPBC, because I know that when I was on PPBC, we knew, we had a map that had everything included. And I think the other piece that I'm going to get is look in the Needham Housing Authority, because they also have maps of where that housing is located for that land. But one of the things that I wanted to talk to both of you, and let's talk about what we need to do next, but is our goal is to get all this information to present at the meeting on June 9th. Alex, that's the date, right? She's still here. So basically, what else beyond what we've already, where are you guys with what the work that you're doing? And then in general, is there anything else that we need to look at? So I don't know, Michael or Carol, if you want to.
Sure, I can go. So I was tasked with, really looking at the capacity of kind of town resources apart from the schools. And obviously the schools are the biggest issue, but I think in talking to Dave Davison, I think we might arrive at the same conclusion, which he said is, there's no answer for that. And it's very project specific. So if you're looking at increasing, for example, the ability to zoning changes to, further develop multifamily housing or ADUs within kind of a residential zoned district, he said that really has no discernible effect immediately on town resources, because the roads are already there. They're paving the roads, they're plowing the roads, they're policing the neighborhoods, to the extent that everybody that moves into an ADU is over 80, then arguably you might have more, need for ambulance services or capacity at the senior center. But focusing on growing some multifamily units in a residential in a residential district is kind of the least taxing on town resources. So there's kind of a continuum, right? So there's ADUs, then maybe increasing, from say zoning from maybe 1 story or 2 stories to 3 stories, similar to what was done at the old Carter building, which was now it's assisted. It was a nursing home. It's now going to be converted into some assisted living, but then there's a sliver of apartments kind of on the top floor. So that would create additional housing. And again, that probably wouldn't have a huge increase in utilization of town resources, because again, the road, all that is still there. But he said he said, for example, if you want to build a 500 unit apartment building, depending on where you site that, you may have to build a road. You would have to do a traffic study. You might have to provide transportation. So that's the most taxing on town resources. And that is very project specific. So you'd really have to, and that requires, just like the Muzzy property, additional zoning to move forward. It would be hard to envision that the town would permit the zoning to change so that a 500 unit apartment complex could be developed as of right versus by special permit. So it would be a discussion and a negotiation among the select board and the planning board and town meeting to kind of come up with what the right construct is for that project. So that was on really town resources. So I do think it is, and he said it's just very it's project specific, again, that being said, we had a bit of a discussion on like the MBTA
MBTA communities.
housing, and that he said, again, that depends where you cite that. The one other thing he did say is that for most of these developments, particularly where the market rate of rentals is 80%, and that's where Needham is at generally for their affordable housing. He said it's tax-based neutral because the developer pays the taxes. And so the developer will obviously build X amount of market rate units to compensate them for the affordable units that they're building. He did say that the issue with a much lower, much higher, affordability to the lessee is that, so if you wanted to reduce that market rate of rent to 50%, then it becomes just a huge discussion on building density of housing that right now we haven't built and we don't have zoned for. He said, because it has to be much denser than what we have done in the past to make the numbers work.
In order to, right. So you basically have to create more units so that the market units can carry the affordable units. Is that
right? And he said, I said, is there, any instances where towns have done kind of TIF agreements similar to what they've done for TripAdvisor? And he said that there's no TIFs for residential construction, and that would be residential construction. So
what's TIFs? I'm not aware of what that means.
Tax incentivized financing agreements. So
okay. Yeah.
TripAdvisor had basically a 10-year kind of tax holiday, if you will, to incentivize them to move. They were originally in Newton, and they moved their headquarters into the Needham Business Center. And the reason that was done is to really generate commerce in that, in that parcel, and that, it worked pretty well. And it did work well because other companies moved in. However, NBC Universal also wanted a TIF agreement, so at which that worked because of unique tax ramifications for like taxes on PP&E, and because they have a good amount of PP&E, so the TIF agreement was still revenue positive to the town. But there are no TIF agreements that he knew of for residential construction. And I think that's really
And Carol, remind me
I have.
remind me who gave you this information?
Dave Davison. He's basically the CFO of the town, but he's the head of the finance department.
Okay. And
he works very closely with the finance committee. He prepares all the budgets for the town. Any time you see, like, he will be preparing the school master plan, 25-year model to look at how we will be able to finance those school projects. He is a tremendous resource to the town. He could go to any Wall Street firm and make a lot more money, or to any company and be a CFO. So we are really fortunate to have him.
Great.
So that's all for me. I'm happy to, I will put these in notes, and then we can.
I just took notes, so.
Okay.
But I'll send them, and you can always change them or revise them.
Great.
I have a question. So I have here capacity of town resources, and then financial overview of options. I don't know what that, is that the same thing? Or I don't know what that means.
Well, I think that is kind of the same thing, and that's what he hinted at, that in terms of like, if there's a continuum of least taxing for town resources, largest impact on town resources and finances, it would be ADUs at the low end, and
Right.
high density multifamily housing at the high end.
Yeah. That's good to know. Okay. That's great. Okay. And Michael, I have you here and I could, let me share my screen really quickly.
Sure.
Just so that you see what I'm doing. So what I did is I kept this up here. I changed the date. So I'm making meeting minutes too for today. I kept this because this is the purpose, is the same. But what I'm doing is, if I said I have Nuari information for this piece, Carol, I just typed up something, ADU, increasing zoning and stories. So developments of market rate. So that's yours. And then financial overview is same as capacity of town resources above. So Michael, I have you for school capacity and communication to town.
Yes. So on school capacity, and right before our
I'm gonna stop sharing.
call, I sent over a note. So there was a demographic study that had been done by McKibben Associates that sort of projects out about 15 years from sort of where our schools are in terms of enrollments. And what Needham is, in comparison to maybe some of our other benchmark communities, is we are continuing to rise in school enrollments, where some other districts may actually see decline. So preparing for that. Through the pandemic, there was a decline in enrollments for Needham, where some families opted for other arrangements for their children for schools. And so we are sort of a little bit down in these couple of years in comparison to pre-pandemic, but do anticipate over this 15-year period out to 2036, 2037, to continue to sort of see an increase. So shared some numbers that our current school enrollments are at a little over 5,500. 15 years out, we anticipate to be around 5,700. So a cumulative change of almost 200 students that will be in district. In terms of sort of where the biggest areas will sort of see the growth, just in terms of population, will be more at the middle and high school. That 15 years out will still be pretty flat, or maybe 10 to 15 students more within the elementary schools. There are a number of components that are sort of factoring into some of these areas for growth in terms of Needham population, where we continue to see a rise right around 32 thousand, and I think projected out to about 2035 that we might get up to about 35,000. Then there's sort of the balance between, are there more births or deaths in coming to Needham, and seeing, I think that there's the birth rate continues to decline a little bit, but then we have some families that continue to move in. We have a big component, and this is really where there's the unknown, is if there were larger housing projects that get built over the course of the next 15 years, how that would impact the schools. As Carol mentioned about the big school master plan that's going on to create a new Mitchell, to renovate Pollard, to potentially consider that for a full middle school to incorporate 6 through 8. And to potentially either have High Rock as either a 6th elementary school, to either have it as potential universal preschool pre-K, or would it be utilized for some other sort of office swing space that the schools use, potentially maybe even into the town, and that's being all planned out. The plans that the school committee approved, there are several options that have been presented over the course of the last couple of years, but the last iteration has projections of the master plan. Once we actually start, move forward, thinking about all the financing for it, would be potentially as quick as a 9 to planned out to maybe a 16-year time period. So where does that sort of land within these 15-year projections? Let's see here. But what was found with some of the larger multi-unit complexes like Kendrick, Madera, is that while some of these locations have multi-bedroom units, that there hasn't been a significant increase in school-aged population. So if there were larger projects that potentially get in the works, when we hear more on the MBTA, that really will that impact the schools, and the potential that that might not so much be the case.
So just Michael, I have a couple of comments on that. That's good information.
Yeah.
I do remember when they, not so much Modera, because obviously that was allowed by right as opposed to special permit. So there was no weighing in by select board, finance committee, town meeting. But for the Kendrick, they really did focus on a portfolio of more 1 bedrooms versus 2 and 3, specifically to minimize the impact on the schools at that time, because the schools were, that was planned pre-Sunitha Williams. So the schools were really at capacity, growing / bursting at the seams. So I don't know that you can use that data, use that data and project forward. I do remember when we were doing and Natasha, you probably remember this too, when we were doing some of the analysis on the Muzzy property and the impact that housing would have on Muzzy. There must be kind of industry conventions on X balance of, bedroom units yield X amount of children. So I think that information is available and buried somewhere in that housing analysis for Muzzy.
There was, and there was minimal housing that we required for that project for that reason.
Right, but we looked at, I remember Jean McKnight and looking at different scenarios. So
Right,
I think it'd be helpful to just have the kind of ratio, if you will, or what that factor was.
Right.
Would be helpful.
So I'm just, who did the demographic study again, Michael, and when was it done? This
Sure,
year?
this was done in fall of 21. So, and McKibben, MCKIBBEN Demographic Associates. And this is still also, we sort of had this presented to us at a school committee meeting in the fall of 21, and was also sort of deemed as sort of our preliminary sort of enrollment projections over the next 15 years.
But Michael,
Incorporating some of our census data, redistricting. Yes, Carol.
but prior to the 21 work that McKibben did, they did one a year earlier, I think.
Yes,
Or-
yeah, there's one, maybe 1 or 2 years earlier. as
Yeah,
well.
but that one showed more of a decline in the population.
I remember it. I remember a decline in population when we were looking at the Williams School at PPBC.
So
that
I,
time.
I would be interested in looking at, I think it'd be helpful to have both of those studies together,
Sure. No, thank you for that. And thank you for the additional background, Carol, that you shared on some of those projects.
Well, it's just I think it's helpful to have that kind of factor analysis as something you can really look towards when
Sure.
you're looking at a new project.
Mhm.
So let me just make sure that so basically, if at status quo or just in the regular ebb and flow of new people coming into town and people leaving town, you're saying that from now in 15 years we're going to grow by 200 students, most of them in middle and high school,
Yes.
and then 10 to 15 students more in elementary school. Area of growth
Yep.
is 5,000 people, but it won't affect the schools necessarily in that way.
And in terms of our sort of current growth plans of where we're at as a town, as Carol mentioned, the schools are pretty much at capacity in terms of even trying to bring in an additional 15 or maybe 20 students could be a challenge, but the schools are able to make accommodations. And I think that's where, with the master plan, as it's being presented and the possibility of High Rock becoming a 6th elementary school, would it alleviate some of the stress that some of the current schools have to provide more space opportunities.
Right.
And
I
that's still
know
to be decided.
most of the schools don't really have a lot of room for capacity unless we start
No.
building, unless we bring in the not temporary, but the
The
units,
modular.
the modular units, and that's what we did in Mitchell.
Mhm.
And so, okay, so and then
Michael, I do have one question. I don't know if
Sure.
the school committee ever looked at this or McKibben looked at this. I know the population of school children that left the public school system for private schools during the pandemic ticked up pretty significantly.
Mhm.
And I don't think we've gotten all those students back, some of them, but has anybody looked at, new families moving into town? So like incremental new student population. Are more of those families choosing private school than have in the past? Do we know? And I just asked that for the obvious question that if the average home is $1.5 million now,
Mhm.
are your thoughts about schools different? And I don't know the answer to that question.
Sure, that's a great question. I am not familiar with that analysis as well, but could certainly explore more with that. It would be I think is anecdotally that families, when they move here, they're coming here, a large number one reason is for the schools and to be in district. But there certainly are some families, as we know, who have chosen to not be a part of the Needham Public Schools reasons. And so that would be something I could see if I could explore getting information.
Or at least at at least certainly at a period of time, right?
Mhm.
So
That's a really good
maybe,
point, is the type of unit that comes in. How, or the density that comes in, what yields more students in the school system. Which I think based
Right.
on what you're saying, I mean, it sounds reasonable to say that those that are buying the bigger houses have more, a capacity to have a choice.
right. So I
of it.
guess that's the question is, do those families, are more of those families making a choice in 7th grade or high school to send their children elsewhere so that maybe we have more capacity at the high school? I don't know, going
Good
forward.
question.
Okay.
And then, and if there's no more questions sort of in terms of schooling in regards to capacity, the other area that I was tasked with was in terms of communications.
Mhm.
I actually reached out to our public information officer, who actually happens to be out this week. So look forward to hopefully connecting with her on her return, but had provided, just at least in terms of all the different mechanisms that we're currently utilizing within the town. There's a number of different resources with how we're communicating information. So if it is something that pertains with housing through the social media, a number of different channels there, our town meeting newsletter, there's the notify me reminders, certainly the website, message boards throughout town. For those that might be reading the Needham Compass through the senior newsletter at the Center at the Heights. So all the different ways that we sort of communicate information, but still looking to get more information or clarity on allocation of time when it comes to housing and how the town, and maybe this is even something that we're able to get internally within our housing office here through Lee or Alex, what percentage or time that they're sort of allocating towards communications and how they're messaging within other town offices.
That's really. So, what do you want me to write up for this? I have communication person is out of town. We'll get clarity on our allocation of time for communication. What else do you think? Do you want me to write as an update?
I think probably just I shared sort of the different ways that we're communicating through the town, so that there's just multi-channel ways that we're sending out messages,
Right.
and how, it's not just one message that gets out there, and it's having to think about, okay, it needs to get, when we're just even thinking about the survey that we had over the last couple of weeks, that there were multiple ways that we kept on thinking of different groups that we need to reach out to. So with that there, and I think the other part is just maybe internally within the office's sort of time of what they're allocating towards communicating on different projects, initiatives, that if it's either from myself or, if we can just go to Alex to sort of see what they're working on. And do plan to connect again upon her return next week with our public information officer to get more.
Right. So one of the things, how do we communicate, the kind of planning initiatives, right? And that's something that we as a planning board also need to, communication and community outreach is something that, and stakeholder outreach is super important. And I think we need to create a more clarity on a plan for that, for the planning board in general, which would be helpful for this as well. So so sorry, Michael, is that, I have here.
Yep, I'm all set right now for the areas. And then for transportation, I think I shared prior to our call that there isn't a comprehensive town-wide study, I reached out to TMAC, so the Transportation Management Advisory
Mhm.
Committee, and it's not sort of really under their jurisdiction that sort of comes up with some of these big comprehensive studies. They're more specific to, we'd like to have explore a new traffic signal in a specific intersection or a new crosswalk in this area of town. This area might have a specific speeding zone question. So that is not really within their purview, and had shared with me that there isn't, but there are hopes to have a more comprehensive traffic transportation study to sort of say, okay, where are the 5-10 real sort of hotspot areas in terms of traffic when we're sort of looking at some of our housing units and developments, and especially with the MBTA community. So, but that there are specific projects that, whether they had actually come to fruition or had just sort of been proposed and we do not move forward with, that maybe in a very specific area of town that maybe have had some analysis done.
So it's the same thing that basically Alex just told us,
Yes.
that
Mhm.
it's kind of ad hoc. It depends on, projects sometimes are, we're requiring them to do it, but it's not, there's no comprehensive piece, which would be in some ways good to have,
Mhm.
especially because I have to tell you, traffic is the number one complaint
Oh, yeah.
and concern when we're doing projects. And I'm sure for many other things. So, okay, great. So I'm typing all this up like furious. I hope I get it right, but I think this is great information. And I actually got information from Hank Half on the town land. So maybe I'm just gonna, Michael, if you think that you're all
I'm all set. Yes.
set.
Thank
Okay,
you,
let me share my screen. So there are plans, in the town has plans, including this town of Needham, which I'm gonna just blow this up down here, indicates the town and public entity owned parcels. So there's the schools are in orange, town and trustees of memorial, so the parks are in blue, town park and recreation is yellow. Then there's town conservation commission is the green and yellow. Town select board and DPW is this magenta color, which is the RTS and these other areas. Town entity unknown, so such as this here, there are these smaller lots that are town entity unknown. Needham Housing Authority has the ones that are in dark, but I mean, there's not that much Needham Housing Authority land, frankly. Well, here there is, sorry, I apologize. The Needham Golf Club, the Crown and Shield Management, Stephen Palmer. So I guess that's a senior center. Well, Stephen Palmer's here. That's where the old senior center used to be. So I don't know how that's designated separate, right, or why that is. And then other government entities. So, obviously the schools take up a lot of space in the town, and Park and Rec takes a lot of space. So I think this is really great to see, especially, and I'm just going to, I haven't really dissected it that much besides, but one of the things that would be interesting, that is interesting to see, is that there's not a lot of town land around the MBTA stations, right? And so I need to look at it a little further, but I think I'll put it, I'm trying to figure out where to put all this information so that we can share it. I'll just email it to everyone. I'll keep it and I'll send it over to Alex and Lee. Maybe they can put it on the website, the information that we're gathering. But so I know that when on PPVC, it was really hard to find, when we were doing studies for schools and for other things, it's hard it was hard to find land and to be able to do some of the bigger projects. But I guess it's interesting to see where the housing projects are, which are not necessarily anywhere near the MBTA communities for the Needham Housing Authority, except for this one.
What's interesting is that it seems like there's a lot of park and rec land right adjacent to 128?
Yes.
Hmm.
All of this yellow. And what's interesting is also when we were doing this, so this is the golf club, and then this is PSAB is here. The school, this is where we were looking at one point for the middle school, or when we were doing the study, because wait, where's Pollard? Pollard is here. Yeah, so we were when we were looking at the at this site for a new school, when we were looking at, you know, what do we do with High Rock, or what do we do with Pollard as a study, or even Hillside actually was Williams. We were looking at sites over here also, so maybe there's, if there's a large site like this, when we study it, it might be that, you know, there's a negotiation between Park and Rec, and the proportion of land probably stays the same, but that there's some flexibility on a site like this, which is an unusual site.
But that's DeFazio.
Right, but we were looking at a school here.
Mhm.
Right, but that's the issue, is that that is under the jurisdiction of Park and Rec.
Right, but so I
Mhm.
guess my question is, what is this public entity, you know, the town parcels? There obviously there's some flexibility for us to be able to study that, right?
I think there's flexibility to study it, but I think that it would really be difficult to change that jurisdiction. And I'm just speaking about this parcel because I think they fought tooth and nail, because several years ago, they redid the jurisdiction of some town-owned land. And I believe the select board tried to take that jurisdiction, I could be wrong, away from Park and Rec. And it was, that did not happen. So it's,
Yeah, I don't know how it all, yeah. And yeah, I agree. I don't
mean-
know. I don't know how it all works out, and it didn't have to play itself out, but the one thing that is interesting is that Cricket, which we looked at also,
Mhm.
is a town entity unknown. So what does that mean? Right?
I don't know.
well, is it all of Cricket or just a piece of Cricket?
It looks like it's all of Cricket. I mean, it looks like it's this parcel here. So, but I guess the interesting part is that if we're trying to, and I'm just talking, you know, thinking out loud here, is if the MBTA communities, I mean, all of this is private, so there are opportunities for this to be developed, right, in a private way. So to me, that, you know, that's kind of interesting that there's opportunity for density, private density, you know, private developers to come in and do some density in those specific areas. Probably not so much. So here's Junction, and then where's Hersey? Hersey's here, and this, yeah.
Yeah, not as much at Hersey.
Hersey is,
So this is Junction. It's interesting that the commuter rail lines are not here, but here's Broad Meadow Road here,
so Hersey's up here.
and Great Plain Ave. Sorry, Hersey is here, right?
Yeah,
In this little area here. That's the parking lot.
no, because you're at 135.
So Great Plain, Great Plain, Great Plain.
So Hersey's up here.
I can't see where you're pointing, sorry.
Sorry, if you have to go past,
No,
Pod,
but you
like
don't
right
go
around
past,
there.
I don't think you have to go past the, yeah, it's in here because this is the golf club, right? So
Yeah,
it's right
and then
here,
it's past
where
Harris.
number one is, yeah.
So it's right around number 1. Yep.
So this area probably doesn't have as much opportunity for density because of the golf club and other things than Junction, the center of town, and Needham Heights, right?
Hmm.
Right, yeah, here.
Yep.
Um,
No, this is really helpful to see it and conceptualized by all the sort of trades.
yeah,
You know.
I agree, but I mean, most of the town-owned land is built up. I mean, there are very few parcels of land that aren't. And I don't know how the Needham Housing Authority was designated, right? I don't. Oh, there's the Needham Housing Authority here. I thought it was at the corner of Central and, but. So there, it's kind of, it's segregated to this area here. And then this is the one that's more centralized.
Mhm.
So, and we're gonna have Reg come talk to us. He said capacity building. He sent an email to us, I think, saying about capacity of town resources. He says one impact on the Needham Housing Authority MRI is impact on the schools. The MRI currently plans to add 72 new family units. We also plan to add 209 new senior disabled units, which will necessitate an increase in associated social and home health care services. The key watchword is aging in place. So I will add that to our notes. So I guess he added some other things. So the MRI envisions adding 281 new deeply affordable units over 5 to 10 years. And this will need zoning changes. So I might just add all this to our notes, some information that he had given me.
Great.
So I think, so
I'm gonna have to hop off right
I
now.
do
I'm
too. I
sorry.
have a
Yep.
9.
Hmm.
I think this is super helpful. I guess what are the next steps? We have one more meeting. We have to put together. I'm gonna try to get maybe I'll put together some of this information into a PowerPoint.
Yeah,
That works well. I know that was, I think, discussed as how we deliver this. I know in terms of some of the areas for myself, I'll, like I said, get back in terms of communication with our PIO, and also the recommendation for the demographic study that we had done prior to this most recent one, just to sort of see that as comparison. And then
Okay,
also
just put here.
the question on when a new family sort of moves into our community, what if we have any sort of information on how are they staying in district or they're choosing other alternatives for schooling.
yeah, and I bet, if you had just asked Ann Gulati, she might have some
Yeah.
information on that.
Yes, thank you.
I think also one entity maybe we haven't spoken to, but I can put in a call to a friend of mine there is the, Needham Newton Chamber to see if they've done any work at all on thinking about traffic, MBTA, transit-oriented housing, like what have they done? If they've done anything jointly, I don't know, but it's an easy call to make. So I just want to make sure we've kind of touched all our bases.
Right. And I am going to, I'm looking here to see, I got the information from Nuari. I think I have all the information that I have. I'm just gonna start putting together the PowerPoint and I'll send it to you.
Great.
And then if you want to, I'll just do something very quickly. If you want to add more information and send it back and we can just kind of put it together.
Sure.
Okay.
And I had sent you already, Natasha, some notes in terms of some of the demographics. So if that gets incorporated into some of the PowerPoint, you have that right there. And any questions, let me know.
Yeah, and I think what would be good to have is I'm just gonna do, the larger bullet points. I'll just do slides for those transportation, so that we only have like 6 slides or some, and it's
Okay.
just
Sure.
I think it'll just be like, the summary of those
Mhm.
areas, and then we can, I'll put a
Like an
document together
attachment or an
that they
addendum.
can, put on the website with
Okay, great.
the additional information. I think it's more just, this is all the information that we found, like all this information, what we just talked about, the summaries of all of it. So I'll take a first pass and then we'll see where we go.
Thank you. We're in good shape.
I
Thanks.
know, we're running behind and now I feel like we're running ahead.
Well, we'll see
Kind
you
of.
later on this evening, correct?
Yes,
Right.
Yes.
See
See you
you all
tonight.
thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.